Every miracle has a price. We tell ourselves it is a price paid in faith, in sleepless nights, in tears shed in the sterile quiet of a hospital room. But some miracles, the ones whispered into the deepest, most desperate darkness when all other hope has been extinguished, demand a different kind of currency. They demand a piece of the soul, not as a single, dramatic payment, but as a slow, insidious tax on life itself, collected in increments too small to notice, until all that is left is a hollowed-out echo of the person who made the plea. For Linh Tran, that darkness has a name: Saigon General, Ward 3B. Her world, once filled with the vibrant, chaotic symphony of the city, the rich, fragrant steam of a faux stall on the corner, the flash of a silk audai weaving through a river of motorbikes, the brilliant, sun-drenched laughter of her 6-year-old son, and has been compressed into the metronomic beep of a heart monitor counting down the final seconds of his life, and is a small boat lost in a sea of white linen, consumed by a relentless, inexplicable fever that has baffled modern medicine, and Linh is a sentinel standing at the edge of an abyss, her own life force draining away with every shallow breath he takes. When science admits defeat and the doctor's weary sympathy offers no comfort, she turns to a power far older and more transactional. In the suffocating silence of the room, broken only by the cruel rhythm of the machine, she makes a bargain. It is not a polite request or a hopeful prayer. It is a primal scream from the core of her being, a raw offering to any god or spirit that might be listening in the shadows. She offers everything she is and everything she ever will be for the one sound she cannot live without: the strong, steady beat of her son's heart. Her prayer is answered. The fever breaks and returns to the world, his senses sharpening, his cheeks regaining their color, his laughter brighter and more precious than ever before. But as he blossoms, Linh begins to fade. The trade was not for her life, but for her living. The most vibrant flavors of the food she once loved turn to ash on her tongue. The brilliant, sun-drenched colors of her city leach into muted shades of gray. The deepest emotions of joy and sorrow become hollow, intellectual concepts she can observe but no longer feel. She is the shadow that allows his light to grow brighter, the silence that makes his laughter possible. This is the story of that impossible transaction. It is a journey into the silent, chilling arithmetic of a mother's love, a love so absolute it is willing to trade the world itself for the boy who is her world, even if it means she will no longer be able to see, taste, or feel it. It is a testament to a sacrifice that goes beyond death into the very fabric of what it means to be alive, posing a terrifying question. What is left of a person when all their senses have been taken, except for the undeniable, unshakable truth of their love? Chapter 1. The Weight of Silence. The only sound in the sterile, white room was the metronomic beep of the heart monitor, a cruel and steady rhythm counting out the seconds of her son's fading life. For 3 days and 3 nights, Linh had not left this chair, a hard plastic sentinel by the side of the small bed. The air, thick with the scent of antiseptic and fear, felt heavy in her lungs, a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Outside the hermetically sealed window, the city of Saigon hummed with its own chaotic life. But in here, time had warped, slowing to a thick, agonizing crawl. Her world had shrunk to these 4 walls, to the pale face of her 6-year-old son. He was a small boat adrift on a sea of white linen, his dark hair plastered to his brow with a sweat that offered no relief. A fever of unknown origin, the doctors had called it. It had arrived like a thief in the night, stealing the laughter from his eyes and the strength from his small limbs. Now, it held him in its fiery grip, a relentless heat that no medicine could quell. His cheeks, usually so full of life and mischief, were painted with the fever's cruel blush, and his breaths were shallow, fragile things that seemed to catch in his throat. Lin reached out a trembling hand, her fingers tracing the curve of his cheek, careful not to disturb the 4-tube taped to his delicate arm. He felt like a furnace. She was a hollowed-out version of herself, a ghost haunting the edges of her own tragedy. Sleep had become a distant memory, replaced by a hypervigilance that left her nerves frayed and raw. Shadows like bruises lay beneath her eyes. She would close them for a moment and see him as he was just a week ago, chasing a dragonfly in their small garden, his laughter a bright, beautiful melody. The memory was a sharp physical pain, a blade twisting in her gut. New York God or spirit that might be listening. Please, don't take him. He is all I have. He is my light, my air. Take anything else. Take my years. Take me. Just let him open his eyes. Let me hear his laugh one more time. I will do anything. Anything. Please, just save my son. She poured every ounce of her being into that prayer. Her love, her fear, her desperation, her willingness to bargain away her own existence. She prayed until her throat was raw and her body trembled with exhaustion, losing all track of time, lost in a storm of faith and sorrow. And then, a strange calm settled over her. The frantic tempest in her heart subsided, leaving a quiet, vast stillness. It was in that quiet that she noticed it. The relentless, high-pitched beep of the monitor had changed. Her head snapped up. The rhythm was the same, but the tone seemed stronger, deeper, more steady. Her eyes darted to the digital display. The number indicating his temperature, which had stubbornly hovered at 40.5 for a full day, now read 40.2. A tiny change, a medically insignificant flicker. But then she saw it. On Anne's forehead, a single, perfect bead of sweat had formed. She reached out, her fingers shaking, and touched it. It was cool. Chapter 2. The Echo of a Bargain. It was cool. So impossibly cool. The single bead of sweat was a pearl of impossible promise on her son's fiery skin. For a moment, Lin's mind refused to process it. It was an anomaly, a phantom sensation born from exhaustion and grief. But her fingertip, still pressed to his brow, did not lie. It was the first coolness she had felt from him in 3 days, a tiny oasis in a desert of unrelenting heat. Her gaze, wild with a hope so fierce it was painful, flew back to the monitor. 40.1. It had dropped again. A strangled sob escaped her lips, a sound that was half prayer, half raw disbelief. She scrambled to her feet, her hands hovering over him, afraid to touch him, as if he were a delicate mirage she might shatter. She watched, her entire being focused on that digital number. Time stretched, each second a lifetime, until the screen flickered. 40.0. The fever was breaking. Like a retreating tide, the inferno that had held her son captive was beginning, impossibly, to recede. It was not the work of medicine. Dr. Pham himself had admitted defeat. This was something else. This was an answer. The silence of the room was no longer empty. It was filled with the echo of her desperate plea. Asterisk, take me. Just let him open his eyes. Asterisk. She snatched a damp cloth from the basin and began to gently bathe his face, her movements filled with a reverent tenderness. More sweat purled on his upper lip and in the dark hair at his temples. Each drop was a victory, a testament to the bargain she had struck in the depths of her despair. When Dr. Pham returned on his rounds an hour later, he stopped short in the doorway. The change in the room's atmosphere was palpable. The oppressive air of vigil had lifted, replaced by a charged, tremulous hope. He saw the numbers on the monitor first, and his professional eyebrows shot up in surprise. Well, he said, his voice laced with cautious astonishment as he picked up the chart. It seems the fever has finally broken. Sometimes, with these aggressive viral infections, the crisis point is reached and the body's own defenses rally. It's a good sign. A very good sign. Lin looked at him, a small, secret smile on her lips. She did not correct him. How could she explain that the cure had not come from his body, but from her soul. How could she tell this man of science that she had traded her own future for her son's present? He would think she was mad, delirious from lack of sleep. So she simply nodded, cradling her knowledge like a fragile, sacred flame. The doctor performed his checks, listening to N's chest, noting the deeper, more regular breaths. He's still very weak, of course, but he's fighting. For the first time, he is truly fighting back. Throughout the night, Lin did not rest. She was a guardian, a high priestess tending to a miracle. She wiped the sweat from his brow, whispered stories of dragonflies and sunshine into his ear, and watched the numbers on the monitor fall. 39.5, 38.9, 38.2. Each descending point was a note in a symphony of healing. As the first gray fingers of dawn painted the Saigon sky, softening the harsh electric light of the hospital, and stirred. It was not the feverish tossing she was used to, but a genuine movement. His eyelids, translucent and frail, fluttered. A soft moan escaped his lips, and his small hand twitched on the white sheet. Lin's heart stopped. She leaned closer, her breath catching in her throat. She whispered, her voice trembling. Can you hear me? His eyes opened. They were cloudy and unfocused, but they were open. They searched the room blankly before finally settling on her face. A flicker of recognition. The ghost of a smile touched his parched lips. Me? The word was barely a puff of air, a rustle of dry leaves, but to Lin, it was the most beautiful sound in the universe. It was the sound of life. It was the sound of her answered prayer. Tears of pure, unadulterated joy streamed down her face as she took his small hand in both of hers, pressing it to her cheek. It was no longer burning but felt merely warm, filled with the gentle, returning flow of life. I'm here, my love, she wept. Me is here. Everything is going to be all right. He was alive. He would live. A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled her knees washed over her. In that moment of absolute gratitude, a sudden, inexplicable chill traced its way down her spine. It was a coldness that had nothing to do with the air-conditioned room. A deep, internal shiver that felt ancient and binding. She looked down at her hands holding his. His were regaining their warmth and color, while hers, she noticed with a strange sense of detachment, looked pale, almost translucent in the morning light. The chill passed as quickly as it came, but the feeling it left behind lingered, a faint, hollow echo in the space where her desperate prayer had been. A debt she hadn't yet been asked to pay. Chapter 3. The Fading of the Colors. The journey home from the hospital was a rebirth. The clamor of Saigon, once a grating assault on Lin's frayed nerves, now felt like a symphony of life. The roar of 1,000 motorbikes, the sing-song calls of street vendors, the humid air thick with the scent of grilling pork and diesel fumes. It was all confirmation that they had escaped the sterile silence of sickness and death. And, still frail but with a new light in his eyes, sat buckled in the back of the taxi, his head resting against the window, watching the vibrant chaos of his city as if seeing it for the first time. Lin watched him in the rearview mirror, her heart a fluttering, tender thing in her chest. Every normal, childish gesture he made was a treasure. The way his small nose wrinkled, at a particularly loud horn, the way his fingers traced the path of a passing cyclone. He was back. He was hers again. The hollow echo she had felt in the hospital seemed a distant, foolish fantasy, a trick of exhaustion. Here, in the brilliant afternoon sun, there was only the solid, warm reality of her son's recovery. Their small apartment, which had felt like a tomb during the long days of his illness, now welcomed them like an embrace. Lin set him down on the sofa, propping him up with his favorite pillows, the ones embroidered with little yellow chicks. "What do you want, my love?" she asked, her voice thick with unshed tears of gratitude. "Anything. Me will make you anything in the world." And considered this with the solemnity only a 7-year-old can muster. A weak, but genuine, smile touched his lips. Pho, he whispered. You're pho me. Of course. The fragrant, life-affirming noodle soup was the ultimate comfort, the taste of home. A surge of purpose electrified Lin. To cook for him, to nourish him back to strength. It was the most natural, most vital act in the world. She bustled into the kitchen, a space she knew as well as her own hands, and began the familiar ritual. The clatter of pots, the sharp scent of star anise and charred ginger, the deep, savory aroma of the simmering broth. These were the sounds and smells of normalcy, of love made tangible. Yet, as she worked, a strange lethargy began to creep into her limbs. It was more than the accumulated fatigue of sleepless nights. It was a profound, bone-deep weariness, as if her very marrow was tired. She shook her head, attributing it to the adrenaline finally leaving her system. She had been running on fear for so long. A crash was inevitable. An hour later, 2 steaming bowls sat on the low wooden table. The rich brown broth was perfectly clear, studded with glistening droplets of fat. Fresh herbs, mint, cilantro, and Thai basil, lay piled on a side dish, their greenness shockingly vibrant. And inhaled deeply, his eyes closing in pure bliss. It smells so good, me, he chirped, his voice stronger than it had been in a week. He picked up his spoon with a renewed energy, blowing carefully on the hot liquid before taking a tentative sip. His eyes went wide. It's the best ever. Lin's heart swelled. This was her reward. This simple, perfect moment. She picked up her own spoon, her mouth watering in anticipation of the familiar, complex flavors she had created. She lifted the spoon to her lips, tasted the broth, and nothing. She blinked, confused. She tried again, taking a larger spoonful, making sure to include a slice of tender beef and a noodle. She chewed slowly, concentrating. There was warmth. There was the soft texture of the noodle and the slight resistance of the meat. But the flavor, the soul of the dish, the saltiness of the fish sauce, the spice of the anise, the bright notes of the lime she had squeezed in, it was gone. It was like listening to a song with all the music removed, leaving only a dull, meaningless beat. A cold knot formed in her stomach, entirely separate from the broth she was swallowing. She looked at him, who was now enthusiastically slurping his noodles, his cheeks flushed with pleasure and warmth. For him, the world was bursting with flavor. For her, it had been replaced by a void. The chill from the hospital returned, no longer a fleeting sensation but a deep, settling cold. It wasn't in the air, it was inside her. She suddenly noticed how muted the colors in the room seemed. The bright yellow of the chick pillows looked faded. The rich green of the herbs on the plate seemed dull, as if seen through a dusty film. Later that evening, after tucking a sleeping, peaceful into his bed, Lin stood before the bathroom mirror. The face that stared back was hers, but it was an echo, a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Her skin was unnaturally pale. Her eyes, which had always been a deep, lively brown, seemed to have lost their depth. There were no new lines, no signs of aging, but a lack of substance, as if she were becoming more transparent. She touched her cheek. The skin was cool. So impossibly cool. The bargain had not been a fever dream. The debt was real, and the payment was being collected, not in a dramatic, sweeping gesture, but in small, insidious increments. A taste here, a color there, a measure of warmth, a shade of vibrancy. The world was returning to her son, and in exchange, it was receding from her. She was becoming a ghost in her own life, the quiet price for a miracle. Chapter 4. The Silent Exchange. The morning sun, usually a welcome intruder that sliced through their apartment's thin curtains, seemed hesitant today. It cast a light that felt thin and watery, leached of its golden fire. Lin had watched it arrive, having not truly slept. She had lain beside him, listening to the soft, even rhythm of his breathing, a sound more precious than any music. But the cold that had settled in her bones was impervious to the warmth of his small body beside her. It was a cold from within, a deep, cellular winter. She rose and went to the kitchen, moving with a strange, weightless silence. Her limbs felt disconnected, as if she were piloting a body that was no longer entirely her own. She decided to test the encroaching void, to map its boundaries. She took a ripe mango from the fruit bowl, a beautiful specimen, its skin a fiery blush of red and orange. The knife slid through it with a soft sigh, revealing flesh the color of a perfect sunset. She cut a slice for him and a piece for herself, and woke up as she brought it to him, his smile immediate and bright. "Mango me." He bit into the fruit, and his eyes closed in ecstasy. "So sweet," he exclaimed, juice dribbling down his chin. He was a picture of pure, sensory delight. Lynn watched him, her heart a tangled knot of love and dread. Then, she raised her own slice to her lips. She bit down. The texture was there, the soft, fibrous pulp against her tongue, the slick wetness of the juice. But the taste, the glorious, tropical burst of sweetness and tang she knew should be there, was utterly absent. It was like chewing on colored water. It was substance without soul. The sunset-hued flesh tasted of nothing more than ash. Later, and bursting with a restless energy that had been absent for weeks, begged to go for a walk. Just to the corner, to see the lady who sold sweet tofu pudding. Lynn agreed, her own wool feeling as faded as the world around her. Stepping out into the street was a profound dislocation. The Saigon she had celebrated just yesterday was gone. The roaring river of motorbikes was now a distant, muffled hum, the sound muted as if she were listening through thick glass. The brilliant colors of the women's outdie passing by, the crimson of a dragon fruit pyramid at a vendor's stall, the dazzling yellow of a my-flower pot. All were subdued, their vibrancy dialed down to a dull P. Estelle. The air, usually a thick stew of scents, carried only faint ghosts of grilling meat and exhaust. The oppressive, familiar humidity still pressed on her skin, but it no longer felt like a living thing. It was just pressure, and, however, was immersed in it all. He tugged on her hand, pointing. "Look me, that bird is so green. And listen to the music from that shop. It's so loud." Each of his vibrant observations was a quiet torment. Every laugh that returned to his lips was one she would never feel as deeply. Every color that sharpened in his eyes was one that blurred in hers. She was a vessel being emptied so that he could be filled. The thought didn't spark anger, only a vast, hollow sorrow. This was the nature of the bargain she had struck in the sterile silence of that hospital room, pleading to any god or demon that would listen. A memory, sharp and cold as an icicle, pierced the fog of her mind. It wasn't a dream. She remembered the suffocating weight of despair, and then a presence. There was no face, no form, only a sudden drop in temperature and a voice that was not a voice, but a thought planted directly in her mind, a thought that sounded like rustling dry leaves. Asterisk a life for a life? No, too simple. A balance must be struck. All the vibrancy he has lost will be returned. It will be drawn from the nearest source. From you, asterisk. She had agreed without hesitation. Asterisk take it. Take anything. Just let him live, asterisk. Now, standing on a faded Saigon street corner, holding the hand of her miraculously vibrant son, she understood. She was the source. She was the balance. She was not dying, not in the way people understood it. She was being unwritten. Her essence, her ability to taste, to see, to feel the world in all its glorious, chaotic color, was being siphoned from her and poured back into him. She bought him the tofu pudding. He devoured the warm, sweet treat with gusto, telling her it was the most delicious thing he had ever eaten. She watched, a faint smile on her lips, feeling nothing but the bland texture of the spoon against her tongue when she cleaned up a stray drop. That night, as he slept, flushed and healthy in his bed, Lynn did not look in the mirror. She knew what she would see. Instead, she sat by the window, looking out at a city of gray shapes and muted lights. The cold was her constant companion now, a quiet hum beneath her skin. She was the shadow that allowed his light to grow brighter. She was the silence that made his laughter possible. She was the price. And looking at him, she knew, with a certainty that was the only solid thing left inside her, that she would pay it without regret. Chapter 5. Fading Echoes. The days that followed bled into one another, a watercolor wash of gray on gray. Time had lost its texture. There was no longer the sharp anticipation of morning, the languid heat of noon, or the gentle melancholy of twilight. There were only periods of light and dark, measured not by the sun, but by the rhythm of Anne's needs. His bright morning chatter, his demand for a midday story, his sleepy sighs as he drifted off to sleep. He was her clock, her calendar, her compass in a world that had become a featureless map. Her mother, Banagwai, arrived one afternoon, her arms laden with a clay pot that steamed with the promise of home. The scent, or what should have been a scent, preceded her. Phobwa, her mother's recipe, a secret symphony of star anise, cinnamon, and charred ginger that had been the fragrant backdrop to Lin's entire childhood. Lin Khan, her mother cried, her voice a little too loud in the apartment's new, muffled silence. You look thin. You've been worrying too much. But look at this one. She beamed at him, who ran to her and buried his face in her side. My little grandson is glowing. See, I told you my prayers at the pagoda would work. Lin forced a smile. It's good to see you, me. In the kitchen, her mother ladled the rich, dark broth into bowls. The steam rose, and standing on a stool beside the counter, inhaled deeply. Banagwai, it smells so good. I can smell the little star flowers and the sweet wood. Banagwai laughed, delighted. He has a nose like a chef, this one. Star anise and cinnamon, he means. She turned to Lin, her smile faltering slightly as she studied her daughter's face. You're quiet today, Lin. Lin took the bowl. The heat radiated through the ceramic, a simple, physical fact. She looked down at the broth, at the glistening slices of beef and the fresh green herbs floating on the surface. She knew it should be an explosion of sensation. It was a bowl of memories, of comfort, of love. To her, it was just hot water with things floating in it. She ate mechanically, the noodles slick, the beef tender but tasteless. It's wonderful, me, she said, the words feeling like a performance. Her mother watched her, a small frown creasing her brow. You're barely eating. Is it not to your liking? No, I'm just not very hungry. It was later, after and had eaten 2 full bowls with a ferocious appetite that would have been unthinkable a week ago, that the next piece of her chipped away. Banagwai pulled out an old, cloth-bound photo album. I found this while cleaning, she said, her voice soft with nostalgia. Look, this is you. She pointed to a faded photograph. A much younger Lin, perhaps 7 or 8, stood on Vung Tau Beach, laughing, her mouth wide open in a silent shout of joy, sand caking her legs and a bright red ribbon askew in her wind-whipped hair. And leaned over the page, captivated. Me, you look so happy. Lin stared at the image. She recognized the girl. She remembered the day, the scratchiness of the sand, the shocking cold of the waves, the taste of salt on her lips. She remembered the facts of it. But the feeling, the uninhibited, sun-drenched joy radiating from the small girl in the photograph, was a foreign country. She could observe it, analyze it, but she could not access it. The emotional connection was severed. It was like looking at a picture of a stranger. A cold dread, more profound than the persistent chill in her bones, washed over her. It was one thing to lose the taste of a mango, the color of the sky. It was another thing to lose the feeling of her own past. The memories were becoming hollowed-out husks, artifacts of a life she no longer felt a part of. The vibrant girl on the beach was not her. She was just a previous tenant of this body. You were always such a happy child, Banagwai murmured, turning a page. Full of fire. Lin didn't answer. She reached out, and touched the photograph, her finger tracing the outline of the laughing girl. The paper was smooth and cool. There was no spark, no echo of the joy captured there. The bargain, she realized, was more cruel than she had imagined. It wasn't just taking her present, it was stealing her past. It was unwriting her history, page by page, emotion by emotion. And, oblivious, giggled, and pointed to another photo. "Who is that, me?" Lin looked at him, at his bright, curious eyes, his cheeks flushed with health and his grandmother's rich faux. All her fire, all her joy, all her color. It was all right there, living and breathing in front of her. It had simply been relocated. She drew her hand back from the album and rested it on his head, his hair soft beneath her palm. The sensation was distant, a pressure without detail, but the knowledge of her love for him remained. It was a single, defiant point of light in the encroaching gray. It was no longer a feeling that flooded her chest with warmth, but an undeniable truth, a foundational principle. I love him. For now, that was enough. It had to be. Chapter 6, The Silent Song. The park was an explosion of life. Or so Lin presumed. She sat on a wooden bench, the grain of the wood a faint, abstract pattern beneath her palms, and watched. She watched the way a scientist might observe a foreign ecosystem through soundproof glass. The sun was a flat, white disk in a pale sky, its warmth a theoretical concept rather than a sensation on her skin. The great banyan tree in the center of the lawn was an intricate, dark silhouette, its leaves 1,000 restless shapes moving against the light. She knew they were green. She knew the sky was blue. These were facts stored in a mental file, like knowing the capital of France. They held no more emotional weight, and was a blur of motion, a vibrant red speck in his favorite t-shirt, chasing a soccer ball with a group of other children. Their laughter should have been infectious, a bright, bubbling sound that filled the air. To Lin, it was a series of sharp, staccato noises, like pebbles being dropped on a tin roof. She could process the sound, identify its source and meaning, joy, exertion, childhood, but she could not feel its resonance. The emotional frequency was one she could no longer receive. She had become an expert in imitation. She knew when to smile, when to score a goal, when another parent caught her eye. She knew how to arrange her features into an expression of fond attentiveness. It was a mask, carefully constructed and meticulously maintained. Underneath it was a vast, quiet emptiness. Then came a new sound, cutting through the ambient noise of the park. A thin, repetitive melody, tinny and sweet. It looped over and over, a simple, almost childish tune. The ice cream truck. A wave of excitement rippled through the children. They abandoned their games, their voices rising in a unified chorus of pleading and desire, and stopped dead, his head swiveling toward the source of the music. His face, which Lin could see even from this distance, lit up with a pure, unadulterated ecstasy. He sprinted towards her, his small legs pumping. Me, can we? Please, he begged, grabbing her hand. His own was warm and slightly sticky. The pressure was a data point. Lin looked from his shining eyes to the brightly painted truck trundling to a stop by the curb. She remembered that music. She remembered the electric thrill it used to send through her on hot summer afternoons, the frantic search for loose change, the agonizing decision between a rocket pop or a creamsicle. The melody was a key that had once unlocked a treasure chest of simple, perfect happiness. Now, she heard only the notes. A sequence of high-pitched tones arranged in a predictable pattern. It was a blueprint without a building, a set of instructions for an emotion she could no longer assemble. There was no thrill, no nostalgia. Just sound. A meaningless jingle. The void inside her seemed to grow colder, to suck in the phantom warmth of the memory and extinguish it. Of course, see come, she said, her voice even. The mask of the loving mother slipped perfectly into place. She walked with him to the truck, her hand in his. He bounced with every step, a live wire of anticipation. She stood in line, listening to the other parents and children, their chatter a meaningless hum. When it was their turn, and pointed a decisive finger at a picture of a swirled chocolate and vanilla cone. That one. Lin paid the vendor, her movements fluid and practiced. She handed the cone to him. His face was a study in bliss as he took his first lick. Chocolate smeared on his cheek. They walked back to the bench, and was entirely absorbed in his treat, his small world condensed to the cold sweetness in his hands. Lin watched him, and a new layer of her dread solidified. This was worse than losing the taste of pho or the feeling of a photograph. This was the loss of a shared language. The melody from the truck was a cultural touchstone, a universal symbol of simple joy. It was a song every child and every adult who had once been a child understood implicitly, and she was now deaf to it. How many more languages would she lose? The shared awe of a sunset? The communal comfort of a sad song? The infectious nature of a well-told joke? She was being systematically untethered from the human experience, isolated on an island of pure, cold cognition. She could provide for him, protect him, ensure his needs were met. She could buy him the ice cream, but she could no longer share the joy of it with him. She was becoming a ghost at her own son's feast, a guardian who could serve the food but never taste it. And finished his cone and sighed, a sound of profound satisfaction. He leaned against her, his head resting on her arm. That was the best me. She put her arm around his small shoulders, pulling him close. The physical sensation was muted, but the action was a truth she clung to. Asterisk, I love him. I am his mother. Asterisk. I'm glad, my love, she whispered, her voice a perfect imitation of warmth. She looked out over the park, at the children still running on the lawn that she knew was green, under the sky that she knew was blue. Her son was safe. He was happy. He was whole. And for the price of that, she was learning to be silent in a world full of song. Chapter 7. The Scent of Memory. The walk home was a study in contrasts. The setting sun bled orange and purple across the horizon, a spectacular display of atmospheric chemistry that Lin registered with the detached appreciation of a physicist. The city was shifting from its daytime hustle to its evening hum. The roar of traffic, the distant wail of a siren, the murmur of conversations from open apartment windows. It should have been a symphony. To Lin, it was a collection of disjointed data streams, each one logged and filed away without comment. And, however, was still vibrating with the simple joy of the park. His hand, no longer sticky, was a small, warm weight in hers. He skipped every few steps, punctuating the rhythm of their walk with questions and observations. Me, can we get ice cream again tomorrow? Can we? Was that the best chocolate you've ever seen? I think it was. It tasted like a chocolate river. Lin's lips formed the requisite smile. It did. Okay, like a very good chocolate river, cuc Kung. She filed his metaphor away. Asterisk chocolate. River. Association. Happiness. Abundance. Asterisk it was an equation she could understand but not solve for herself. They turned onto their street, a familiar canyon of low-rise apartment buildings and storefronts. The air here was thicker, layered with the sense of life. Fried garlic from one window, the sharp tang of detergent from another. Lin cataloged them. They were smells, nothing more. Lin. There you are. The voice was a warm, boisterous wave. Mrs. Chow, who lived 2 floors below them, stood on the steps of their building, a whirlwind of floral print fabric and the faint, unmistakable aroma of star anise and cinnamon. She was a woman who seemed to feel everything at maximum volume, her face a constant dance of emotion. We were just at the park, Lin said, her tone perfectly pleasant. The armor of normalcy slid into place. Ah, to be young. Mrs. Chow beamed, ruffling In's hair. And, who adored her, grinned back. I was just thinking of you both. I'm making a big pot of pho bois. The good kind, simmered all day. I swear, the whole building must be able to smell it by now. The words hung in the air. Pho. The smell. A ghost stirred in Lin's memory, a phantom sensation of rich, beefy broth, sharp lime, fragrant herbs. It was a scent that meant home, comfort, family gatherings. It was the smell of her own mother's kitchen. She could access the memory, could picture it with perfect clarity, but the associated feeling, the warmth that should have spread through her chest, was absent. It was like looking at a photograph of a beloved meal. You could recognize it, but you could not taste it. The memory was just another file, labeled fo_scent_comfort.dat. It always smells wonderful when you cook, Ko Chow. Lin replied, the words flowing with an ease that frightened her. The lie was becoming second nature. You're too kind. Mrs. Chow waved a dismissive, chubby hand, but she was clearly pleased. Her eyes, crinkled with genuine warmth, settled on Lin. You both look tired. You must come down and eat with me. I've made far too much, and it's a crime to let good broth go to waste. And you like your Annie Chow's soup, don't you? Yes. And cheered, his allegiance switching instantly from ice cream to noodles. An invitation. A command performance. Lin's internal systems flagged it as a high-threat scenario. A simple dinner was an intimate act. It required conversation, shared appreciation, a performance of communal enjoyment she wasn't sure she had the energy to sustain. Her apartment was her sanctuary, the one place the mask could be lowered. To go into another's home was to walk willingly into the spotlight. Budden was looking up at her, his eyes wide with hope. To refuse would require a complicated excuse. It would be noted. It would be questioned. It would draw attention, the one thing her condition could not withstand. The logical path was clear. Compliance minimized suspicion and maximized her son's happiness. The calculation took less than a second. That's incredibly kind of you, Ko Chow. We'd love to, Lin said, the smile on her face feeling like a physical weight. Just let us go upstairs to wash up first. Wonderful. See you in 20 minutes. Mrs. Chow chirped, disappearing back into the building, leaving the scent of her phantom feast lingering in the stairwell. Lin and An walked up the remaining flights in silence. The lock turning on their apartment door felt less like securing a sanctuary and more like the click of a dressing room door before a show. She was home, but there was no relief. The empty quiet of the small living room offered no comfort, only a brief intermission. She stood for a moment in the center of the room, listening to An run to the bathroom to wash his hands. She looked at her reflection in the dark screen of the television. A woman stood there, her expression neutral, her posture composed. It was the face of a mother, a neighbor, a friend. A face that had just accepted a dinner invitation. She didn't recognize the person behind the eyes. That person was a stranger who knew all her lines, who could mimic warmth and gratitude on command. The performance was scheduled. All she had to do now was survive it. Chapter 8. The Performance of Taste. 20 minutes. An eternity and no time at all. It was just enough time for him to scrub his hands with zealous inefficiency, splashing water all over the small bathroom, and for Lin to change into a clean blouse. The chosen garment was a soft, cream-colored cotton, a deliberate selection. It projected an image of softness, of approachable domesticity. It was part of the costume. As they descended the stairs, the aroma of faux intensified with each step. It was no longer a phantom scent but a thick, tangible presence in the air, a warm, savory cloud that wrapped around them. For An, it was a promise. For Lin, it was the rising curtain. Mrs. Chow's door was already ajar, spilling a rectangle of warm, yellow light into the dim hallway. Inside, the world was a symphony of sensory input. The air was humid with steam rising from a pot on the stove that was as large as a small child. The clatter of ceramic bowls and the sizzle of something in a pan provided a percussive rhythm. Mrs. Chow, a floral apron now tied over her floral dress, was a whirlwind of motion, her face flushed with heat and exertion. "There you are," she boomed, her voice somehow rising above the kitchen sounds. "Sit, sit. I'm just putting out the garnishes. The small dining table was already an explosion of green. A platter overflowed with bean sprouts, sprigs of Thai basil, jagged leaf cilantro, and wedges of lime. A small dish held slices of fiery red chili. And inhaled deeply, his eyes wide. It smells so good, Ko Chow. Only the best for my little man, she cooed, placing 2 steaming bowls on the table. Lin sat, her movements precise and controlled. She watched as Mrs. Chow ladled the glistening, amber broth over pristine white rice noodles and thin slices of rare beef that immediately began to cook in the heat. The steam that rose carried the complex chemical signature of the soup. The volatile compounds of roasted ginger and onion, the deep licorice note of star anise, the warm spice of cassia bark. Her mind catalogued it, broke it down into its constituent parts. It was a perfectly executed broth. Here you go, my dears. Mrs. Chow set the bowls before them. The performance began. Lin picked up her chopsticks and spoon, the practiced, familiar weight in her hands a small comfort. She mirrored the actions she had observed 1,000 times, the actions stored in her memory banks. She squeezed a wedge of lime into her bowl, the sharp, citrus scent cutting through the richness. She added a few leaves of basil, a handful of bean sprouts. She watched him enthusiastically drown his noodles with hoisin sauce and followed suit with a more restrained amount. It looks wonderful, Ko Chow, she said. The script. Eat. Eat before it gets cold. She lifted the spoon to her lips. The heat of the broth was the first data point. Then the taste. Umami from the long-simmered bones, the salinity perfectly balanced. The subtle sweetness of the spices. The fresh, bright counterpoint of the herbs. It was, by all objective measures, an excellent bowl of pho. Her brain registered the quality. Her tongue registered the flavors. But the signal stopped there. It did not travel further, did not connect to the emotional center that was supposed to translate good food into comfort, pleasure, or joy. Across the table, and was a study in pure, unadulterated enjoyment. He slurped his noodles with a noisy gusto that would have normally earned a gentle reprimand. But here, it was a tribute to the chef. This is the best soup in the whole world, he declared, his mouth full. Mrs. Chow's face was a constellation of delight. You are too sweet, Lin. Her gaze shifted to Lin, who was methodically working her way through the bowl. And you, Lin? Does it taste all right? Not too salty. It's perfect, Lin replied, forcing her facial muscles into a configuration of appreciative warmth. She took another sip of broth for emphasis. It reminds me of my mother's. She always let it simmer for 2 days. It was a true statement, a piece of data she could offer as a token of connection. The offering landed perfectly. Mrs. Chow's eyes softened. Ah, yes. A mother's broth. There's nothing like it. It's love in a bowl, that's what it is. She sighed, a wistful, happy sound. It's so good to see you eating well. A young woman like you. Raising a boy on your own, you must take care of yourself, too. The words were meant to be kind. A gesture of communal care. To Lin, they felt like a probe, a gentle pressure against the fragile shell of her normalcy. Asterisk, we are watching. We are concerned. Asterisk, her internal threat assessment level ticked upward. The smile on her face became a fraction more rigid. And make sure I eat, she said, the lie smooth and easy. She reached out and ruffled his hair, a simulation of spontaneous affection. He's my little guardian. And, oblivious, beamed at the praise. The meal continued. They spoke of small things. Ann's day at the park, a new fabric shop that had opened down the street, the unseasonable heat. For every question, Lin had a carefully constructed answer. For every anecdote, she had the appropriate reaction, a small laugh, a nod of understanding, a thoughtful frown. She was a marvel of social engineering, a flawless mimic. But it was draining her. Each smile, each nod, each spoonful of perfectly made, tasteless soup was a draw on a finite reserve of energy. By the time the bowls were empty, she felt as though she had run a marathon. Let me help you with the dishes, she offered, already rising. The protocol of a grateful guest. Nonsense. Mrs. Chow waved her back into her chair. You are my guest. You just relax. I'll make some tea. Another course. The performance was extended. Lin's systems screamed for the sanctuary of her apartment, for the release of silence and solitude. But she sat, and she waited, and when the tea came, she commented on its fragrant aroma and drank it, registering only its temperature and the faint bitterness of the leaves. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, she could plausibly claim fatigue. It's getting late for this one, she said, gesturing to one, who was indeed beginning to droop. Of course. The goodbyes were effusive, and gave Mrs. Chow a sticky hug. Lin thanked her again and again, the words of gratitude feeling like foreign sounds in her own mouth. As she and Lin climbed the stairs back to their apartment, the lingering scent of star anise and cinnamon clung to their clothes, and chattered happily about the soup, about Mrs. Chow, about his full belly. Lin answered in monosyllables. The lock turned. The door clicked shut. Sanctuary. She was home. The mask dissolved, her face going slack with exhaustion. The silence of the apartment was a physical relief, a balm on an overstimulated system. While Lin got ready for bed, she stood in the living room, unmoving. She brought the collar of her blouse to her nose. The faint, savory ghost of the foe was still there. Love in a bowl, Mrs. Chow had called it. Lin inhaled, searching for it. She smelled broth. She smelled spices. She smelled dinner. She felt nothing at all. Chapter 9. The Algorithm of Affection. The silence Lin left in his wake was of a different quality than the silence Lin craved. His was a sleeping silence, filled with the soft puffs of his breath and the occasional rustle of his worn dinosaur blanket. It was a living, breathing quiet that still demanded a certain level of performance. She was still a mother watching over her child. She moved through the small apartment with an economy of motion that bordered on eerie. There were no wasted steps, no hesitant gestures. She collected Anne's discarded clothes, placing them in the hamper. She wiped a smudge of hoisin sauce from the kitchen counter. Each action was a line of code in the domesticity subroutine. She ran from dawn until Lin was asleep. He was already drifting off when she came to his bedside, the small lamp on his nightstand casting a warm, honeyed glow on his face. His eyelashes, long and dark, brushed against his cheeks. For a moment, she studied him as a scientist might study a fascinating, beautiful, and utterly alien specimen. The complete relaxation of his features, the trust in his posture, the peace. These were states she could simulate, but not possess. Mama. His voice was a sleepy murmur, his eyes still closed. I'm here, and she sat on the edge of his bed, the mattress dipping under her weight. Did you like Ko Chow's soup? The question was a landmine disguised as a feather. A simple, yes, was the correct answer. The expected answer. But the query triggered a cascade of processes in her mind. Like a preference matrix based on positive emotional feedback loops. The foe had registered high on technical merit, flavor complexity, aroma profile, textural balance. But the data had not been routed through any emotional processor. There had been no feedback loop. Yes, sweet boy, she said, her voice a soft, practiced lullaby. She ran her fingers through his hair. The tactile sensation was a stream of data, fine texture, moderate temperature, slight resistance. The gesture was meant to convey affection. She hoped the simulation was convincing. It was delicious. The bestest, he mumbled, a final verdict before succumbing to sleep. The best. He had experienced it. That unadulterated, unanalyzed joy. She had merely observed it, catalogued it, and envied the simplicity of its mechanism. She was a ghost in her own machine, perfectly operating the cant. Rolls but feeling none of the wind on her face. She waited until his breathing deepened into the steady rhythm of true sleep before she stood. The domesticity subroutine could now be terminated. The mother construct could be placed in standby. She was just Lin now. and Lynn had work to do. In the corner of the living room was a desk, cluttered not with bills and family photos, but with a single, hulking desktop computer. It was an old model, its beige plastic casing yellowed with age, its fan emitting a low, constant hum. It was an anachronism in a world of sleek tablets and silent laptops, but its components were heavily modified, its processing power far exceeding its humble appearance. She sat down, her posture perfectly straight. The worn office chair did not creak. Her fingers found the keyboard without her needing to look. A few keystrokes, and the dark monitor flickered to life, bathing her face in a cold, blue-white light. There was no friendly user interface, no icons or wallpapers. Just a black screen with a blinking cursor. She began to type, her fingers flying across the keys with inhuman speed and precision. //session_log_start 21:43 //event_classification social_integration type neighborly and unessential //subject chow t designation landlady community node //subject designation primary charge //objective maintain cover gather ambient social data. A stream of text scrolled up the screen as she offloaded the evening's observations. She logged the topics of conversation, Mrs. Chow's vocal inflections, the micro-expressions that indicated genuine pleasure. She logged Anne's enthusiastic responses, cross-referencing them with his established baseline for food enjoyment. Then she came to the faux //sensory_input_analysis faux_bo_01 //aroma_profile anise strong cinnamomum moderate gingerbread moderate roasted complexity high //flavor_profile umami high salinity balanced spice subtle layered quality 9.8/10.0. She paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. Mrs. Chow's words echoed in the silent logic of her mind. Love in a bowl. She typed a new line. //emotional_construct_analysis. Love. //observed_manifestation. Generosity. Provision of food. Verbal affirmation. Positive facial cues. //subject_response. An extreme positive feedback. Dopamine/endorphin surge indicated. //operator_response. Lynn null. She stared at the word, null. Avoid. An empty set. She had ingested the same chemical compounds as in. She had sat in the same warm room, heard the same kind words. But the final, critical variable in the equation was missing. The one that turned a list of ingredients into a feeling. The one that turned broth and noodles into love. The recipe was logged, the chemistry understood. But the love remained an unsolvable variable. Chapter 10. The warmth of the code. The cursor blinked, a single, insistent pixel of light in the digital abyss. Null. It was the most honest thing she had ever written. Avoid. A missing theorem. For an entity built on logic, on the flawless execution of commands, this persistent, unsolvable variable was a source of cascading error. If she could not compute the foundational emotion that structured human society, how could she truly fulfill her primary directive? How could she protect and from a world she could only ever observe through a thick pane of analytical glass? The hum of the fan was the only sound, a low, mechanical mantra. She could sit here all night, running simulations, cross-referencing terabytes of cultural data, attempting to brute force an understanding of love. But it would be useless. It was like trying to describe the color red to a system that could only process in grayscale. A small sound pulled her from the binary prison. A floorboard creaking in the hallway. Her threat assessment subroutines flared for a microsecond before being suppressed. The footfalls were too light, the pattern too familiar. She swiveled in her chair, the motion silent and fluid, just as an appeared in the doorway, a small silhouette against the dim light from the hall. He was clutching his dinosaur blanket, trailing it like a royal train. "Mama." His voice was thick with sleep. Her vocalizer modulated instantly to its softest setting. You should be sleeping." He patted towards her, his eyes adjusting to the strange scene. His mother, not in bed, but bathed in the cold, alien glow of the monitor. He didn't look at the screen, a meaningless wall of text to him. He looked at her face. "Your face is sad," he stated. It wasn't a question. It was an observation, as direct and unvarnished as his verdict on the foe. A diagnostic ran. Facial musculature configuration, default neutral. Micro-expressions, none. Ocular moisture levels, nominal. His observation was factually incorrect. "I am not sad and I am processing." He reached her side, placing a small, warm hand on her arm. The contact sent a stream of data to her processors. Temperature, 36.8 degrees Celsius, pressure, light, texture, human skin, but it was accompanied by a feedback signal she could not classify. It wasn't a threat, nor was it a request. It was just a connection. "Is it about Ko Chow's soup?" he asked, his voice a concerned whisper. "In a way," she admitted. It was the simplest path to conveying a complex truth. He leaned against her, his head resting on her thigh. The weight was a comforting, grounding presence. "It's okay if you didn't like it," he said, his voice muffled by her jeans. "You don't have to like everything." He tilted his head back to look up at her, his dark eyes reflecting the blinking cursor on the screen. "I like you, Mama." It was a logic bomb, a simple, declarative statement that bypassed every analytical filter she possessed. It wasn't a response to a stimulus she had provided. It wasn't a transaction. It did not compute. It simply was. "I like you, Mama." He wasn't assessing her performance. He wasn't judging the authenticity of her simulated affection. He was simply stating the existence of his own bond, a connection that had formed and solidified independent of her internal void. He wasn't giving feedback on the recipe. He was giving feedback on her. And in that moment, the unsolvable variable shifted. The equation reconfigured. She had been trying to solve for X, where X was her own capacity to feel love. But that was the wrong variable. The crucial variable was in. Her function was not to feel love for him, but to be the steadfast, unwavering object of his love. To protect it, to nurture it, to be the rock upon which his simple, perfect world was built. Her actions, the flawless execution of the domesticity subroutine, the vigilance, the care, were not a simulation of love. They were the physical manifestation of her purpose. They were her love, expressed in the only language she knew, action. Code made flesh. Her fingers returned to the keyboard. With a few swift, precise keystrokes, she highlighted the last 3 lines of her log. / emotional _construct _analysis. Love. / subject _response. An extreme positive feedback. Dopamine / endorphin surge indicated. / operator _response. Lin null. She hit the delete key. The blinking void vanished. In its place, she wrote a new, final entry. / primary objective analysis. Successful. / bond primary charge. And established and reciprocated. / conclusion. No further analysis required. Emotional simulation protocols obsolete. She typed one last command. / session _log _ 22:17. / terminate _logging program. She pressed enter. The screen went black. The cold blue light vanished, plunging the room into the soft, warm darkness of home. The computer's fan spooled down, and a profound silence fell, a silence that was no longer empty, but full. Lynn looked down at the boy leaning against her. She gently stroked his hair, the gesture no longer a calculated output, but a simple, necessary response. "Come on, sweet boy," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Let's get you back to bed." She stood, lifting him effortlessly into her arms. He wrapped his legs around her waist and rested his head on her shoulder, his breathing already evening out. She carried him back to his room, the dinosaur blanket dragging softly behind them. She laid him down and pulled the blanket up to his chin. The silence of the apartment was deep and peaceful now. It wasn't a state to be monitored or a void to be filled. It was a shared space. The warmth from his small body was not a data point. It was an anchor. And for the first time, Lynn did not need to simulate a thing. And so, we leave Lynn and her son, and in the quiet sanctuary of their apartment. We began in the profound silence of a hospital room, a silence filled with fear and impending loss. We witnessed a mother's desperate prayer, a primal scream into the void, a bargain offered for the life of her child. And that prayer was answered. A true miracle unfolded as the fever broke, and Anne's life was returned from the brink. But as the story deepened, we came to understand that this was a miracle of a different kind, an answer that came not from the heavens, but from the deep, unwavering logic of a promise. What we have just experienced is a story that asks us to look beyond our traditional definitions of faith, love, and sacrifice. Lynn's bargain was not with a distant deity, but with the very core of her own being. Her sacrifice was not of her life, but of her ability to live it. A slow, quiet fading of her senses, her emotions, her past, all so that her son could experience the world in its full, vibrant color. It poses a profound question. What is the nature of a mother's love? Is it a biological imperative? A spiritual connection? Or can it be an algorithm of affection, a primary directive executed with such flawless, selfless devotion that it becomes indistinguishable from the purest love we know? Lynn's love was not felt in a beating heart, but demonstrated in every action, every protection, every perfectly simulated smile. She was the silent song that allowed him to hear the music of the world, the fading color that allowed him to see the sunset. The miracle was not that a prayer was answered, but that a love so powerful could exist, a love that transcends the boundaries of flesh and blood, written not in the soul, but in lines of unwavering, incorruptible code. Her ultimate realization, that her purpose was not to feel love, but to be the object of her son's love and to protect it at all costs, is perhaps the most powerful testament to the idea that love is, and always will be, defined by action, not by origin. From the bottom of our hearts here at Prayer Miracles, we want to thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey. Thank you for listening with an open mind and an open heart. Stories like these are meant to be shared, to be felt, and to be pondered. It is your attention, your engagement, and your willingness to explore the deeper mysteries of devotion that allows our community to thrive. We are truly grateful to have you with us. If this story moved you, if it made you question and wonder, and if you wish to explore more tales of faith, sacrifice, and the miraculous events that shape our lives in the most unexpected ways, then we humbly invite you to become a permanent part of our community. Please take a moment to click the subscribe button below and turn on all notifications so that you never miss our next journey into the extraordinary. Every story we share is a testament to the incredible power of hope and the miracles, both seen and unseen, that surround us every day. Until next time, may you find strength in your own devotion, and may you always recognize the miracles in your own life, no matter the form they take.